Order. The final item of business today is a members' business debate on motion number 4618 in the name of George Foulkes on Bard campaign goes nationwide. This debate will be concluded without any question being put. Will all those who wish to participate in the debate please press the request to speak buttons. I call on George Foulkes to open the debate.
Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer. Can I say that I am really most grateful to have the opportunity to bring this particular issue to the attention of Parliament today, particularly as it has fallen most appropriately on International Day for Disabled People. And we are today discussing the accessibility, or probably more appropriately the lack of it, for licensed premises in particular. But I would first like to say just a word or two about the pioneer of the Bard campaign, Mark Cooper. I am very honoured to have known Mark as a friend for some time now, and I am glad to see him in the gallery today, and I am sure we would all welcome him. Mark has cerebral palsy and uses a wheelchair, and he has had a particular difficult time of it over the past few months. Upon completion of a degree at Aberdeen University, Mark applied for and got a very prestigious job with Lehman Brothers in New York, and he was due to start on the very day that the bank collapsed, a real tragedy. And for a number of months thereafter, he was unemployed, but his great and wonderfully positive manner and his sense of humour has always prevailed. His spirit, his determination to fight inequality and discrimination is really astonishing, and I am sure those who know him and have met him will agree. And it is that spirit which brings us here today. Mark was one of those who was kind enough to help me with my rather ill-fated campaign for the rectorship of Edinburgh University. Grateful to Dr. Richard Simpson for his support, and I am sure Ian McKee would have done so as well if he had had the opportunity. And on the night that the result was revealed after two very long weeks of constant campaigning, I took my campaign team out for a drink, or three, in one of Edinburgh's establishments. And since Mark was coming, we made a conscious effort to go to a pub with street-level access. And members, even the most able-bodied, I am not among them, but there are some around me, will appreciate from their jaunts up the Royal Mile towards Waverley Station that the twists and the cobbles of the old town of Edinburgh are difficult enough to navigate, let alone the stairs and the steps involved in reaching shops and offices and pubs above and below ground. Well, back to that evening celebration. We had settled for an hour or so, and Mark, of course, needed to use the facilities and was frustrated to find that this establishment, like many, many others, not just in Edinburgh but beyond, had no disabled toilet. And their facilities for all customers were downstairs with no lift. So there was no alternative for Mark but to leave the pub, accompanied by a friend, and go 200 yards up the road to the next establishment, where he had to rely on their goodwill, to let him answer the call of nature. And from that day, the Bard campaign was born. I'll give way to Mark.
Thank you very much for taking an intervention. Can I agree with you that the work that Mark has done to raise the profile in the campaign has been absolutely outstanding in bringing all of us to be involved in it? Can you say where you think the campaign goes next? I am very conscious that there are issues about whether you would want to bring compulsion into it or whether we encourage pubs to actually change and improve the facilities they provide.
I am grateful to Sarah Boyack, who has been very helpful in this campaign also. And I say we are not talking about compulsion. The original emphasis of the campaign was to help to identify and promote those establishments with disabled facilities through the City Council's own website, adopting a more carrot than stick approach. And Mark then took his campaign up to Edinburgh City Council, and he made a very powerful and very eloquent presentation to the Council. He argued that it was not his intention to penalise pubs, and I think this will answer Sarah's point, that were unwilling or unable to make the necessary adjustments, but simply to increase the awareness around issues of accessibility. And deciding to go for drinks with friends is an easy process for most of us here, but for Mark and those in a similar situation, there are all sorts of considerations to factor in. And all Mark sought to do was to ensure that when planning a night out, he could look up a website, find out whether that bar that he and his friends planned to go to was accessible. Could he get in the front door? Could he go to the bathroom? Is there enough space between tables to use his chair? Also, and while we are on the issue of wheelchairs, Deputy Presiding Officer, it is worth reminding ourselves of a members' debate that my good colleague Trish Godman initiated just over a year ago regarding the quality of state provided wheelchairs following a Quarriers report which showed that 50 out of 105 surveyed NHS wheelchairs weren't fit for purpose. A year on, I understand, I'm sure Trish will confirm this, that very little progress has been made, and the issue is still of very great concern to wheelchair users across Scotland. To return to Edinburgh City Council, although they were initially reluctant, they soon accepted that Mark's request was a very simple one. In the run-up to his council deputation, Mark established a Facebook group, and it was at this point we began to see the potential for this to grow from a local and a personal issue into a national campaign, which is what we are talking about today and the substance of this motion before us. In just a few days, the Facebook group grew to over 700 people and now stands well over 1,000. Wheelchair users and non-wheelchair users alike emailed in, backing the campaign, congratulating Mark on highlighting an issue which was long overdue some real public spotlight. And Mark's campaign has been so successful that it has now been adopted by the national organisation Capability Scotland, and I am glad to say that Mark is now working for Capability Scotland as the press and campaigns officer. Capability plan to take the campaign to a new level in future weeks and months by proposing an amendment to the Criminal Justice and Licensing Scotland Bill, which I am hoping and willing to sponsor. This amendment would require licensees to produce an access statement as part of their operating plans, a statement of compliance with Part 3 of the Disability Discrimination Act. And I hope that we will have the opportunity, Presiding Officer, in this Parliament to debate this amendment at an appropriate time. But the principle of it is this: no person should be barred from accessing a pub or receive a poorer standard of service because of a disability. That is the principle behind it. Let me be clear, Mark isn't anti-pub, in fact quite the reverse. He loves them. He accepts that the licence trade is struggling at the minute and that adaptations can be expensive or impossible to make due to planning regulations or listed building restrictions. He understands that. He wants to work alongside the licence trade and local authority licence forums to improve the accessibility of pubs and clubs where possible, and to get the right information about the accessibility of venues into the hands of disabled people. Presiding Officer, with the support of this Parliament, the BARD campaign can empower disabled people to make informed choices about where they choose to relax and socialise, and make sure they have the best possible independent lifestyle. Thank you very much.
We now move to the open debate. Speeches of 4 minutes.